Hello and welcome to my dungeon. Fantastic creatures and monsters are a staple of fantasy, sci-fi and horror, and as such they play a huge part in most RPGs. There's a good reason that the Monster Manual is one of the 3 core books of Dungeons & Dragons. And we always want more monsters, something new to fight, something new for our players to fight, something we've never seen before. That's why there are so many monster books out there, capitalizing on that desire. But it's also a fun, creative exercise to create your own monsters. And that is what this video is about. Keep your players constantly surprised with new and fresh monsters without spending tons of money on monster books. Heck, after you've created 100 monsters or so, you can publish a monster book yourself. This video is about creating your own monsters. And I've got a thick 7-page script here. I'll leave my script in the video description below in case you want it in written form. Now, let's get started. There are 3 main approaches to come up with a creature. For one, you can come up with something that is interesting from a gameplay side. Think about the rules, the game mechanics, and how the player's mastery of those rules could be challenged. Second, you could start with the emotions you want the creature to invoke in your players. And third, you can start with the story and the creature's place within the world you are building. Mind you, that is just the starting point. As you work out the entire creature design, you will eventually cover all 3 of these aspects to some degree. The gameplay approach is especially viable if you're working with a complex rule system that can be mastered, or maybe you're designing monsters for a video game. Think about the core aspects of the gameplay: movement, attack, defense, and magic. One, several, or all of these aspects can be challenged by a monster. Keep in mind, for all of this, that there must be an interesting way within the gameplay to overcome the challenges you present, or you will create a monster that is just frustrating to fight or cannot be overcome at all. Movement will be challenged by a monster that forces the characters to move. That can be achieved in many ways. The monster could move around itself, maybe in a special way, like climbing, flying, or burrowing. The characters will have to come up with a way to follow or anticipate that movement. Or perhaps the monster's attacks force the characters to move. Its melee attacks might just be so devastating that you want to keep your distance. Or maybe the attacks are an ongoing area of effect, like a burning floor, that you constantly have to move out of. The monster might also create difficult terrain to move through, grasping rains, a slippery frozen floor, or even earthquakes. What you want here is to force the characters to use more than just the standard movement abilities. They should make use of dashing, jumping, climbing, swimming, flying, and teleportation themselves. The more interesting ways the characters have to move around, the more engaging this type of challenge becomes. You might want to give the characters some special movement abilities during their adventure and then challenge these new abilities with the encounter. Maybe give out some armed vehicles, rings of flying, or boots that let you run on the ceiling. The ability to attack will be challenged by a monster with a powerful or unusual ability to defend. This forces the characters to overpower it or find a workaround. The monster could have an unusually high amount of hit points or regeneration ability, so the characters have to find a way to deal massive damage. Or perhaps the monster's armor class is so high that the normal attacks are not effective. The creature could also be resistant immune, or even be healed by certain kinds of damage. And if you want to be really mean, the monster could reflect certain kinds of damage or retaliate against certain kinds of attacks, like riposting all melee attacks with melee attacks of its own. The more different ways the characters have to attack, the more engaging this type of challenge becomes. You might want to give the characters some special attacks, weapons or spells that might be strange and specific, but become very effective when combating this monster. The character's defense will be challenged by a monster with powerful or unusual ways of attack. This forces the characters to find ways to avoid, reduce or mitigate that damage. The usual way to achieve this is to hit fast, hit hard and hit often. But it could also be attacks that target several characters or whole areas at once. Or it might be elemental or poisonous attacks. Or perhaps the attacks have different or additional effects, like pushing characters back, knocking them prone, ensnaring or paralyzing them. Again, the more different ways the characters have to defend themselves, the more engaging this type of challenge becomes. Can they defend by moving away? Can they boost their armor class somehow? Or gain damage reduction or even immunity? The characters need options in form of special actions, abilities, spells and potions to defend against the special attacks. Lastly, but not least, magic can be challenged by the three previous aspects, as magic can be used to overcome them. But a monster might, of course, use magic to enhance all of the three previous aspects as well. It could use teleportation as movement, invisibility as defense, spells like fireball, telekinesis or hold person as an attack. In general, the harder it is to overcome a monster with mundane means, the more you have to rely on magic and unconventional ways to overcome it. And as before, the more different magical means in form of spells, artifacts and potions the characters have, the more complex your game's magic systems are, the more interesting this type of challenge becomes. After you've come up with the interesting mechanics for your monster, you can use this to come up with the rest of the design, the aesthetics and story of the creature. Does the monster have many HP? It's probably big. Does it have a high armor class? Then it is most likely armored or very fast, nimble or tiny. What limbs, what magic does the monster need for its special attacks and movement abilities? After you've filled all of that in, ask yourself where such a creature might be encountered. Where would it live? How would it live? What mad wizard or god might have created it, and for what purpose? Our second approach to monster design is entirely different. Our second approach to creature design is entirely different. You start by asking yourself what emotions you want your creature to invoke in the characters and the players. And I use the term creature here instead of monster because there's a huge range of emotions you might want to pull on, and not all of them are typically associated with monsters. The first emotion that comes to mind is probably fear. But there are even different kinds of fear, like shock, phobia, disgust, dread and unease. But you might go in an entirely different direction and create a majestic spirit of nature that instills awe. Or an angelic champion sent by the gods in the darkest hour to instill hope. And that might be a small bunny of light that shows you the right way to get out of a dark cave. You might want to come up with a creature that instills hunger. Maybe it looks super tasty. Or maybe watching the creature gorge itself on delicious food instills hunger and appetite. A classic example of a monster based on emotions would be a succubus or an incubus, a monster that not only instills but preys on lust. That is also a good example that you can combine several emotions in your design, in this case lust, shame and fear. You might combine hope and awe in your tree dragon, the champion of the forest. Would take too long to list all possible emotions and combinations of these. There are almost no limits to creativity here. Keep in mind, though, that unusual combinations might give rise to confusion, disgust, and fear. Also, emotions are a very personal and specific thing. People are different, they have different fears and phobias, they lust after different things. So, what the creature will actually do in the end might be very different from what you have expected. All you can really do about that is using your own emotions as a starting point and work from there. You also have to keep in mind that emotional reactions strongly depend on the context. So, rather than just designing the creature, you also have to think about the scene, the when, where and how you want to use this creature. A skeleton might be scary in a dark dungeon when you're running low on supplies and you know about the undead curse. But it's not scary at all in a sunny meadow when you're at full HP and well armed to deal with it. An alien might be scary when it's hunting you through the dark, cramped corridors of a spaceship, but you would feel different about it when you see it in a cage in a research lab, or if it is fighting for your amusement in an arena. In any case, from the emotions you want to instill, you begin to infer the design. Is the creature big or small? Does it have teeth or claws or wings? What color is it? Once you made up your mind about the aesthetics and how you intend to use the creature, you can think about the story and gameplay aspects. The third approach starts with your story and world building. What is the place of the creature in your story and in your world? Is it a natural creature, an animal? Then where did it come from? What did it evolve from? Where and how does it live? What is its ecological niche it's adapted to? If that niche is similar to a niche on Earth, then chances are that the creature is similar to a creature on Earth, due to a phenomenon called convergent evolution. For example, there is a niche of a woodland grazer, an animal that grazes on small plants in woodland areas. This influences, among other things, its size, the position of its eyes, and its behavior. In Europe, a typical woodland grazer is the deer. But in Australia, a typical woodland grazer is a kangaroo. At first, you think they are not alike at all, but look at the shape of their heads. Now there's some similarity. What adaptations would your creature need in order to thrive in its ecological niche and role? You can think of an ecological niche as the role that the creature plays in your story. What adaptations would it need in order to thrive in this role? And since we are writing fantasy, there will be niches and roles that are not present on Earth at all, like mushrooms that grow along magical ley lines using magic itself as nourishment, and the floating mollusks that eat those mushrooms, and the teleporting predators that hunt those mollusks. Your world building will create unique environments, and you just have to fill these environments with plants, mushrooms, animals, and whatever creatures may live there. If you have one of these creatures, there will be an entire ecology around these creatures. Sources of nutrition, food sources, predators, larger predators, parasites, a complete interlocking ecology. Think about how your creature would best fill its niche, its role in the world. From that, you can infer its aesthetics, its size, the shape of its limbs and teeth, its color, its modes of movement and its behavior. Coming from a story, it's also possible that the creature was created one way or another. In that case, you might ask yourself, who created it? How? From what? And what for? The creature's purpose and the maker's means of construction will infer the look and behavior of the creature. Knowing who created it, there will also be a unique personal touch on the creature that does not have to do anything with the creature's purpose or means of construction, but reflects the personality of whoever made it. No matter which of these three starting points you come from, eventually you have to come up with the aesthetics of the creature, what it looks like, how it behaves. Bonus points if you also come up with tracks, sound and smells of the creature. But it's hard to come up with something truly original out of nothing. So unless you write with the help from copious amounts of psilocybin, you will need to build on something that already exists. Luckily for us, there are no shortages of monsters in nature for us to draw inspiration from. In general, you have the options of modifying an animal to fit into your concept, or you mix and mesh several animals together like it has been done for many classical monsters like a chimera or a minotaur. And you can, of course, do both. Let's take a closer look at modifying a creature. One of the easiest modifications is changing the size of a creature. An ant, for example, is not an impressive monster, even though they can lift 10 times their body weight, live in states of millions, and wage constant wars of annihilation against their neighbors. Ants as big as hamsters? Now these might be dangerous to a group of adventurers if they swarm them. Big as dogs? Now these might overrun a city. Big as humans? Now those ants might wage war in a kingdom. Big as elephants? Now you're looking at the Godzilla threshold. If you look at the more obscure places in nature, the deep sea or the very small scale, those places most people are not familiar with, you start to find bizarre and frightening creatures, like this here flea, this scale worm, or this anglerfish. It's straightforward to change the size, strength, or speed of a creature and get something strange and monstrous. But you could also change how a creature behaves, how aggressive they are, what prey they go for, or maybe what hosts they befall. An example might be a mushroom which spores befall ants, makes them act strange, go up on trees where they die, so the mushroom can grow and release its spores in a wide area, infecting more ants. Now exchange ants with humans and you've got the zombies from The Last of Us. How about this parasite that befalls snails? You can see the parasite pulsing in the eye stalks of the snail, makes them easier to spot for birds. Now imagine these parasites befalling humans. I don't want to. Other attributes or behavior you might change are aggression or intelligence. Being hunted by a pack of super aggressive and intelligent baboons is a scary prospect. I mean, regular baboons are clever and aggressive enough as they are. We're just lucky that they don't usually go hunting for humans. This method also applies to humans. Take a human child and make it super intelligent, emotionally cold, sociopathic, and a cannibal. Oh, that's scary. On that note, take existing animals, especially humans, and have them behave in a typical way. Now that is uncanny. That is scary. Especially if they start killing people or worse. Starting by modifying the human form also gives the creatures relatability. There's a good reason that many fantasy species are just humans but with some tweak, like elves, dwarves, orcs, goblins, bugbear, gnomes, and so on. You can of course give the same treatment to an animal, like making a dog more elf-like, so extremely long-lived and magically gifted. Or make a cat goblin-like, even more mischievous and cruel than a regular cat, but also more short-lived and fast-breeding. Now those creatures would be a menace, a plague on the land. Finally, all bets are off if you give your creature magical abilities. But in a fantasy world where magic exists, that is the obvious thing to do. Imagine how the magic of the land would influence the plants and animals. Do they become more intelligent? Can they control shadows or teleport? Do they need to suck the magic and life force from other animals to survive, instead of outright eating them? And how would this magical ability change how the creature looks? Another approach to get an animal's aesthetics, and abilities for that matter, is to combine them from several animals. As I said, you can create classic chimeras by mashing different animal parts together, like your minotaurs, griffins, harpies, and so on. But you can mash any trait of different animals together instead of using outright body parts. How about a cat with poisonous fangs like a snake? How about a wolf but armored like an armadillo? How about rhinos but carnivorous and living and hunting in packs like wolves? The possible combinations are endless. To pick one, go back to your prior design. What are the gameplay traits you need the creature to have? What animal comes closest to those traits? What could you slap onto that animal to make it closer to your design? Maybe a few extra tentacle arms? Perhaps poisonous spines? What emotion do you want the creature to convey? What plant or animal do you link to that emotion yourself? Or what comes at least closest? How could you modify or mash another animal into the mix to come closer to what you are looking for? What is the place of the creature in your story? What animal on Earth is closest to the ecological niche you have created? What could you do to that animal so it better fits into the specific niche in your world, serve its purpose in your story? Perhaps you have a world without mammals, but instead giant insects. What would an insect look like that fills the same niche as a wolf? Probably similar in size, similar mobility, and with vicious claws and pincers. Give it big legs of a grasshopper for crazy jumps, and you are looking at something truly dangerous. I imagine at least one example from each of the 3 design starting points would be good to have, but this video is already getting long enough as it is. So let me see how much interest there is in this topic. If this video gets, let's say, 1,000 views and 100 likes, then I will make the videos with the example monster designs. So if this interests you, like, share and subscribe. There are tons of videos like this on my channel. For now, I bid thee farewell, dreamers, until we shall meet again.